AIPAC lobbied the Pentagon, of course, Congress, the entire Department of Defense, a lot of other government agencies to push forward the section in the National Defense Authorization Act that would basically be fusing the US and Israeli military through like massive technological cooperation. So I just found this out today. I mean, I knew that this was happening, but I found this document today. And I'm really excited because I dug through the depths of hell to find this document, and not one other reporter or not one other news article has published this. Nobody else has published this as of right now. It took me so long to find it. So anyways, I wrote an article on it today on VoteLog. Like, I just published this article 5 minutes ago after finding this document that AIPAC lobbyists, this is the lobbyist disclosure form of AIPAC, that AIPAC published today at 10:24 in the morning. So this morning, AIPAC lobbyists published their disclosure form of their recent lobbying efforts, and it tells you the exact agenda that they were lobbying on and who exactly that they lobbied to. So I'm going to go ahead and share my full screen here, so that way you guys can see this this full document. Let me see. Let me just if you click download too, you can see the document better. So if you click the document, it's going to go ahead and tell you, there we go. Let me see if you guys can see that better. It'll go ahead and tell you exactly who they lobbied, but basically AIPAC, as of this past, there we go. As of this during the last few months, AIPAC has been lobbying on all of these bills. Now, the number one you should be looking at here is the Israel-US Enhanced Cooperation Agreement. This is the one that's recently been pushed into the National Defense Authorization Agreement. So this is kind of how they do it, the US-Israel Futures Act. And it'll tell you here who AIPAC has reached out to regarding this effort. They reached out, obviously, they were lobbying the House, the Senate, National Security Council, the State Department, the Treasury, Department of Energy, Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security, DHS, Department of Commerce. And not only that, but the document actually tells you the exact names of the AIPAC representatives. Looks like there is more than 8 AIPAC representatives here: Marvin Foyer, David Gillett, Deborah Saxon, Alex Bronzo, Orrin Attike, Zachary Moses, Daniel Gray, Celia Grassman, and Adam Saffron, who've been lobbying on this agenda over the last several months. And this is where things get very, pretty insane here, is when you start to look through and you see the exact lobbying efforts. So AIPAC's been doing a lot of work, and it says the lobbying activity, and it'll tell you the exact, there we go, that's how I wanted to make it full screen. It'll tell you the exact things that they've been recently lobbying on. Obviously, all national security and related programs, Department of Homeland Security Appropriations Act, Defense Appropriations Act, Agriculture. And the most important thing here is if you look at all of the resolutions that AIPAC's been lobbying on just the past couple months: Enhanced Iran Sanctions Act of 2025, a bill to repeal the sunset provision of the Iran Sanctions Act, solidifying the Iran Sanctions Act, the Israel Anti-Boycott Act. So if you guys know what's going on there, the Congress, it's already illegal in many states to boycott Israel, where they're pushing new legislation forward now to make it even more difficult to boycott Israel, codified into U.S. law now. AIPAC obviously very much so behind that, very much so pushing that agenda. Illegitimate Court Counteraction Act. If you're wondering why, Marco Rubio recently wrote an article just yesterday in the financial, he wrote an article just yesterday, I believe, in the Financial Times, and he made a video on X stating that they're going to be going after the International Criminal Court. Where do you think that effort is coming from? Well, AIPAC also lobbied the Department of Defense. They've been lobbying the House, the Senate. Where do you think that interest in the Illegitimate Court Counteraction Act is actually coming from? It's coming from AIPAC. They're the ones who've been pushing this sort of stuff. The West Bank Violence Prevention Act. Why are they lobbying? They're likely lobbying against that. So basically, every single bill that you see here is every bill related to Israel or Iran or the occupied West Bank or Gaza. Israel's been lobbying against or for pushing those sort of bills. So I wrote an entire article on it AIPAC lobbied the U.S. Department of Defense on legislation that would mandate the integration of Israeli defense technology into American military programs, according to the disclosure filing posted to the Senate lobbying database on Tuesday, today. This filing, covering April through June, lists the Defense Department alongside the House and Senate, lobbied on the fiscal year 2027 National Defense Authorization Act and the United States Israel's Future Act. It reported over $800,000 in lobbying income for the quarter and names 9 lobbyists. AIPAC's first quarter filing in April reported $844,000 in listed bills with contact names including National Security Council, the State Department, and 4 other agencies. 2 filings put the group's disclosed lobbying income above $1.65 million for the first half of 2026. And that's just their lobbying. It's not who they're backing in races and everything else. It's just their lobbying agenda, what they're doing on Capitol Hill. And this is just what they've disclosed, by the way. So gosh, God knows what's happening behind the scenes. And here's the second document of it. This one was their previous disclosure form for the first quarter. This newest one is what just recently came out, April through June. And we're seeing everything that's been going on here. So much of the legislation that we're seeing here, basically every single Israel-related legislation, they've been taking action on. But what's now interesting to see is a lot of you guys probably are thinking, oh, well, AIPAC's just working on Congress. They're just lobbying Congress. Clearly not. I mean, they're lobbying the Pentagon. They're lobbying, let's see, the Treasury Department, Energy Department of Defense, obviously, Homeland Security, DHS, Commerce. They're going everywhere, basically, in Washington, D.C., and pushing their agenda forward. It lists 9 lobbyists, but think about all of the many more that work underneath these 9 lobbyists, who these 9 lobbyists are reporting to, who exactly are these people going around and pushing this agenda, and exactly the conversations that they're having. So the Futures Act was introduced in both chambers February 12th by Ted Budd, Republican, Kristen Gillibrand, a Democrat, Representatives Ronnie Jackson, Don Davis, a Democrat. The bill did not advance. Now, here's the thing. A lot of you guys, the Senate bill contains additional Israel-related provisions, including modifications to existing joint programs, a $30 million increase for counter-drone cooperation, and a provision for expediting the refueling of Israeli aircraft, the report shows. So if a lot of you guys right now, you might be hearing, obviously, about the National Defense Authorization Act that fuses the U.S. and Israeli military technology in ways that make it very, very difficult to ever separate ourselves. The reason this is such a risk is because now we're basically giving Israel massive leverage over us. Why would we do that? If Israel gets into war and the United States supply chain relies on Israeli technology, who's to say that Israel won't basically quietly or not so subtly use it as leverage against us and be like, well, we might have to withhold this because we're in the middle of war. We're not going to be able to supply you with these weapons. It's basically putting pressure on the United States now to go fight for Israel as much as it can. That's what it's doing. Why would we do this? It's not in our national security interests whatsoever at all. Now, of course, the Israel lobby, AIPAC, they're heavily pushing this. What I want you guys to know is that the way that this went about, the way it entered the National Defense Authorization Act, it didn't just appear out of nowhere. It appeared because right now, the way the National Defense Authorization Act is going is they have their own piece of legislation in the Senate and they have another piece of legislation in the House. And basically, both the House and the Senate are working on their own National Defense Authorization Act legislation. Once it gets approved in both the House and the Senate, a group come together. They create a new one that basically implements both, and they kind of decide how it is, and then it gets to a final vote. Right now, they're still going through the provisions on both ends, which includes, of course, this section, which was pulled from the U.S.-Israel Futures Act that was pushed in both the House and the Senate by the representatives that I just listed, which called for all of this enhanced cooperation, but not just enhanced cooperation. We're now basically the National Defense Authorization Act now includes actually having a new role in the Department of Defense, where somebody is hired now to look at every single thing the U.S. military is doing, everything that Israel is doing, and figuring out ways to fuse the technology. There's going to be a full-time role for somebody to do that, a full-time role. And it's not, and by the time that role is created, it's not going to be in the oversight of Congress at all anymore. So once that role is created, they're going to be going on their merry way. We have no idea what's going to be going on from that point forward. And most likely we'll never know, because anybody that submits FOIA requests, Freedom of Information Act requests, imagine trying to get Freedom of Information Act requests regarding those sort of things. It's going to take you months, years, if at all, to get any sort of information on what's happening behind the scenes at that point. But basically what you can understand is that the United States and Israel are basically going to be fused. Fox News interviewed Netanyahu just yesterday, and the Fox News host just bluntly says, oh, Netanyahu, now that we're going to be starting to pull back aid, what's that mean? What's that mean for the Pentagon merging with the IDF? And she just used the word Pentagon and merging in one sentence regarding Israel. That's just how bluntly she was willing to say it. She had no problem. She just went ahead and stated what we all know is actually happening right now behind the scenes, not even behind the scenes, just in front of our faces, and they're laughing at us about it. So there's one more thing that I wanted to show you guys here. Is if you scroll through, and if you look at the description of this live stream, guys, I did include the link to this article. I already talked to you guys about AIPAC's first filing. Here it is. The Futures Act was introduced in both chambers on February 12th by the senators that I just went ahead and listed. Its central provision reappeared in May in the House Armed Services Committee's Chairman's Mark of the Defense Bill, Section 224, later renumbered to 219. And the Senate Armed Services Committee's bill is Section 1217. So it's in both the House and the Senate. They're pushing this thing on both on both sides of Congress. And now they've changed it. The provision directs the Secretary of Defense, in consultation with the Minister of Defense of Israel. So the whole thing includes provisions for consultation with Israel to establish defense technology cooperation initiative covering research, development, testing, industrial cooperation. Areas listed in the bill include artificial intelligence, autonomous systems, cyber capabilities, missile defense, biotechnology. Now, here's the thing, and this is what's even more scary. They're mentioning all of these things, all of this sort of defense technology, including artificial intelligence. Keep in mind, the way that Israel has advanced so much of its military technology is because it has an entire population of basically lab mice it tests all of its technology on, which is Palestinians. So it goes ahead and it tests all of this technology, all of the spying technology it has, all of the AI surveillance technology. It's testing it on Palestinian lab mice. And now the United States gets to basically take advantage of that, the fact that they have their own guinea pig population. They refurbish this technology, and then they go ahead and sell it to countries around the globe. The legislation follows Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's statement to The Economist in January that Israel intends to reduce reliance on U.S. military assistance. The current MOU provides $3.8 billion annually, expires in 2028. It's much more than that. So here's another thing, and this is another document I was able to find today. The FDD Action, the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, they also reported, and this was their first filing, $270,000 in first quarter lobbying expenses. And then if you look at all of the different bills that they've been lobbying on, which is another pro-Israel wing here, Enhanced Iran Sanction Act, Sanctions Russia Act of 2025, and it goes through and you'll see a lot of it is obviously against Iran, against Russia, and then obviously any sort of action in support of Palestine or against Israel, they're definitely going to be pushing that sort of thing. So this is what's going on. Now, the most shocking thing is just how much AIPAC is actually doing behind the scenes that we don't even know about. So it's not just the House and the Senate, the National Security Council. I mean, they're basically going all around Washington, D.C. to all of these different departments, all of these different buildings, and they're pressuring our politicians and our elected officials to go ahead and just put these bills forward. I told you guys that a few weeks ago now, maybe even a month ago now, I spoke with some state representatives of Oklahoma, but I was talking to them because guess what? In every single state, they have their own lobbyists, and every single state, they're basically going through the same thing that's happening at the federal level. They were telling me how a lot of the time, some of the legislation that they put down on the floor, it's not even them that write it. They were telling me how a lot of the time there's lobbyists that will already have something totally written up and ready to go. And all they do is they just give it to the congressman. And the congressman is like, all right, I sign off on it. Let me just plop this down. And let me go ahead and put it forward. Who do you think actually wrote the legislation to enhance the cooperation between the United States and Israel? You think a congressman wrote that on their own, or you think AIPAC representatives wrote that out and then gave it to the congressman and said, here, push this forward? It was definitely the latter. That's kind of how it works. Our congressmen are just puppets. They're going around and they're just taking this document and that document and they're just tossing it on the House floor, or they're tossing it on the Senate floor. That's what's happening. And AIPAC is running behind the scenes and doing all of that. So every single one of these bills here is something that AIPAC's been heavily pushing or trying to stop from actually happening. It says select as lobbying activity, select as many codes as necessary to reflect the general areas in which the registrant engaged in lobbying on behalf of the client during the reporting period. And the person who submitted this is, let me see, she obviously works for AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, Rachel Hirsch. It actually lists her AIPAC telephone number and her AIPAC email. So I already reached out to her I reached out to her for a remark. Obviously, AIPAC hasn't responded back to me, but I went ahead and reached out to them anyways. So let me go through some of the comments here. So when an American volunteers for the army, will they need to swear loyalty to the U.S. and Israel? Honestly, it's starting to feel like that's where we're headed right now. Absolute treason. I hope everyone will vote all AIPAC candidates out of office. No matter what party they are in, this needs to be stopped immediately. So we're going to have to just wait and see how things move going forward. I also just updated VoteLog, by the way, guys. So if you click investigations on VoteLog, you'll be able to go and find this full thing. And let me go ahead and share my screen here. If you go to bills, you'll see all the Israel-related bills here, and you'll see all of the different ones, including the Futures Act, which is what's basically being pushed. This is the AIPAC Act that Thomas Massey put forward to have AIPAC register as a foreign agent. Now, of course, we know that's not going to, unfortunately, make it anywhere for a floor vote or get through, but he did go ahead and do that. And you'll see here it is, United States-Israel Agricultural Cooperation and Expansion Act. This one was just put forward on June 22nd, by John Hoven of North Dakota. Why is the U.S. and Israel going to focus on enhancing agriculture? The bill expands the U.S.-Israel Binational Agriculture Research and Development Fund, a joint research program established in 1977 to add a new accelerator program to fast-track mid-stage agricultural research project between U.S. and Israeli scientists, authorizes $8 million per year for fiscal years 2027 to 2031 to support these expanded activities. Cementing agricultural cooperation is a pillar of the U.S.-Israel relationship. The bill frames the partnership as economically beneficial to both countries and positions it as a long-term commitment through 2031. And of course, we have a Democrat that's supporting the legislation too. That's always kind of how it works. So if you want to keep going through, go to votelog.org and you'll be able to see all of these different bills that have just recently been put forward. Definitely check out the Insights page too, and you'll be able to see a lot of the new Insights tabs that I've gotten done. Otherwise, guys, that's it for this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found it interesting, I'd appreciate it if you just share the new article I put together. Again, go to votelog.org and you'll be able to see this article, votelog.org/investigation/futures-act. And you can go ahead and share this article with people who haven't seen this document yet. Otherwise, I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll talk to you all again soon. Bye, everybody.